All right, so we need to continue on getting more experience using auto layout constraints and responsive design in general. So go ahead and download the file that's attached here. It's going to be called landing page responsive pre or something like that. It's beneath the video. And you'll see this right here. Now, this might look actually familiar, this navigation, because it's actually a part of one of the early videos on navigations. I decided I didn't want to do a whole navigation from start, so I've included it here as a starting point, but everything else we're going to design custom and then also make it work responsively for tablet and mobile. Okay, so first things first, we do not have a grid as we can see here, so we want to add one. And let's go ahead and change it to a 12 column grid as seen here. And yeah, we have to specify 12 there. We'll get the background color. And in fact, we can just make it white and take down the opacity, say to 5% or so. Now we can still see it, but it's not, blocking our view too much. And make sure it's at that stretch and gutters at 20, and then margin finally, we'll add around 120 pixels. Now it's already evened up and matched up as you can see, so that's the first order of business. And the second order of business here, just taking a look at everything here in general, is it responsive? Well, things aren't sticking to this column, the right side of this navigation. So what do we want to do? We want to take it and we want to make sure that it is right here. All right, so we choose right for the constraints. Now if we drag this in, this stays there, and then this one stays here. And also we can hold Alt and they both come in as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to hide that. And let's get a headline. Now, there's a lot of different places you can put a headline. You can have, it depends on if you're going to have 2 columns or maybe even 3 in some cases. This one, we're going to have 1 column and we're just going to center it, which is completely fine. It's not a big deal if you choose to do that. So what we can do, hit V to go back to select tool, we can bring back or view our grid and then hit T for the type tool and just left click and drag all the way from the very left of the first column to the very right of the last column, and then we will also center this. So now we're going to type in scaffolding, a new company. Clearly, what is the issue here if we're to talk about visual hierarchy? Too small. Our headline needs to really grab the most attention. So we're going to increase that. And by the way, the font is Nunito. Right around there, 42. That looks pretty solid to me in the context of the navigation and the limited user interface that we have so far. Okay? Of course, we can always go back and adjust things. So now what we'll do is we have to see, how does this thing respond? It doesn't at all. All right. So what we want to do, we'll click center right here. And now it works. All right, great. So now let's go ahead also duplicate this. We'll have a sub headline. And just for now, I'm going to put 24. Might end up changing that. I'm not sure. And we're going to say, join us with the latest blockchain innovations. All right, I'm also going to make this regular to increase that typographic visual hierarchy between these 2 elements. And I'm going to make sure I have that. Yeah, we're going to make it just a little bit smaller at around 20 instead of 24. Now to increase that hierarchy between the 2, we can also change the color. Again, I love using this technique where we take the background color it's sitting on and then we add lightness or tone, maybe right around here. The color code for that is A2AAC3. All right, so far so good. Now I'm deciding to have 3 cards here in the center. So that means we're going to bring back our view here of the grid. We're going to get the rectangle tool and we're going to span this across 4 because we only want 3. If we had 4 cards, they would only be 3 columns. So right here looks good, right around that size. And then what I'm going to do is take the background color here and we're going to add shade, which just simply means to darken it. Now, this makes it difficult to see, so let's hide that. How dark do we want to go? All right, so right around there is good to me. So the color code for that is 24262D. Okay, so now in the center, we're gonna have an icon and then just a single sentence or so. So for the icon, I already found an icon. Actually, I'll just do it from scratch. We can right click, go to plugins and iconify. I'm going to type up, already typed it in there, money. And we're going to use this one right here. Drag it on, way too big. Shift Alt, left click, scale down. And we're gonna get ourselves another color here. We don't necessarily always have to use the primary color like this, which would still work. We can get another color. So for instance, maybe like an orangish or so, right there. So FFB800 is the color code. All right, so we have this here. And you can see we could center it right there. I'm choosing to kind of, we're gonna make it a little bit larger actually. Right there, all right? So you could check the width and the height over there. And then also we're gonna have some text on top. So we're gonna duplicate that, Control D, right click, bring to front. We're gonna drag this over here. Now for this one, I don't want it to be the same size as the headline, or the sub headline rather. So we're gonna take it and change it to 16. And I may also want to increase the contrast a little bit more. So I'm just gonna bring this up to C9 CFE5. Next up, I will add a little bit of rounded edges. And that's about 8. And there's our very simple card. Now, of course, we're gonna run into the problem here. If we do this, things aren't working, right? Now remember, we duplicated this. This is why this is kind of being responsive in a weird way. But we need to make some adjustments here. We're going to create a component out of it because there's gonna be 3 of them. So create component. And now if we adjust this, we can see things aren't working. We don't want that image to stretch. Although what's happening inside here, we do want that, we want that same behavior. So we're gonna double click into here. And instead of scale, we wanna change this here to center. We can click there and then also top. So we can center and top. So now if we drag it in, it doesn't scale, but it stays to the center. And everything else is behaving exactly as we want it to. Now let's go ahead and bring back our grid. We're going to duplicate this and duplicate one more. Now, is this responsive? No, it's not. We have that overlapping effect, right? So let's hide the grid. We're gonna take these 3 and we're going to create an auto layout. All right, and when we do that, we're going to change this to fixed and also left and right. Now that's only the first step. This still will not work. See? What we have to do is double click into each one of these 3 and go ahead and change this to fill container. So now they work as expected. Now, one thing I noticed is if we drag this in, notice how scaffolding a new company doesn't create a second line. It'll just stay there. We want to fix that. So we also want to make sure that these don't overlap as well. We're going to create we can do an auto layout here. All right, and then inside of this, we will fill container and fill container. And for this one, I forgot, we're going to change the fix to left and right. All right, so now we have an issue where they're still overlapping on top of each other. So in this case, we want to double click and we want to change fixed height here to hug contents. Now when we make that adjustment, we'll see that this now works between those two elements, but then we still have that other issue where it's overlapping these elements. So what we can do for that, if you want to solve for that problem, we'll take these two elements and we're going to frame them. So right click, we create a, oops, sorry, I did the wrong thing. Right click with both of those selected, frame selection, and at that point we'll add an auto layout where these are on top of each other. And also remember, we'll fix this to fixed and left and right. Now let's see what happens now. It's not working. Remember, when you change it to a frame and an auto layout, it may change this, so these back to fixed width. So we can hit fill container and fill container. Now it's pushing everything down as it should if these decide to collapse. And of course, if we add a longer headline or subheadline and somebody comes back and say, hey, we need to add a word here, forever, for instance, we could see now that adding that can make our life easier when we're dealing with this design, so we don't have to manually move these things around when they're overlapping. Okay, great. So now we're not quite done with the landing page. We're going to have just a graphic down here to illustrate some different settings with our constraints and all of that good stuff. So if you come to this link, this is the URL right here. I'm going to try to remember to link this here in the video. And you can come to this free illustrations page, and we're going to grab this one right here, this JavaScript illustration. You can't just download it individually. You have to download it by download free right here. It's going to take you to a Gumroad page where you can choose to pay a fair price or not. And then you click it and it'll download an actual zip file. And then there'll be a folder called, the name of that particular, it's called JavaScript illustration folder. Double click into that and then grab the SVG, save it to your desktop or so, some folder, and then drag it on to your artboard. So I'm going to do that right here, or rather not drag it, I'm going to paste it. All right, and we have this. Now I'm going to reset this back to where it would be typically when you bring in an illustration. And if we go ahead and move this around, we can see not very responsive. It's not staying in the middle. My goal is to have this stay to the middle right here. Now I did also want to add, just to add a little bit more interesting element, take our pen tool. And again, this is kind of like a graphic design idea. And just drag this out. And hold Alt and take that handle and put it right there, and then we'll just have it come right back. Get rid of the stroke, give it a fill, take the background color it's sitting on and just make it slightly lighter. So I'm going to use 3B3E48. All right. And we're going to position this to the very bottom. And there we go. All right, so now if we take a look at both of these, what do? Well, they don't really stay in the center or anything like that. So what we want to do with this is we're going to center this on both axes so we can check it out now, and it works as expected. This right here will do the same thing. And again, we're going to want to make sure that we drag this all the way out. There we go. Now they should both behave, or not. I don't think it's really, oh yeah, it's not supposed to scale down. It'll just kind of stay here in the center without scaling. And there we go. All right, awesome. So now what we're going to do is we're going to focus on making this responsive. And we have to ask ourselves, when we drag this in, at what point should we make an adjustment? And so a lot of this, it comes into subjectivity. I still think right here, everything's looking pretty solid. What we don't want to happen is this navigation to get too close to that logo. I would not go any closer than this. When you're this close, it's too difficult to discern that it's a separate item like a navigation. So maybe right here would be a good point for you to instruct the developer or whoever's handling this that you want a breakpoint right here. Width is 824. All right, so now what we can do is we can take this, duplicate it, so Alt, Shift, left click, drag. Or by the way, you can just select it and hit Control D, same thing. And now we're going to create our tablet. And so we have to ask ourselves, how is this going to change down here? Because we don't have much room for those 3 cards. All right, so because we took all that time setting things up correctly, it's going to make our life a lot easier. Just doing this stuff is going to be a lot quicker. So let's bring back our grid. And this time we didn't add it to a style, so we don't have to like detach the instance or anything. Let's do 8 here. Let's change this to around maybe 60. Leave everything else the same. Move things over right here. Move this over here. We'll go ahead and take this, hold Alt, drag out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this item, so we're going to double click into it to where we're just selecting that. We're going to go ahead and then duplicate it. So now we have 2 of them. And for the top one, we're going to delete, this card and this card. Then for this bottom one, we're going to delete just one of the cards because we need to keep the 3 that are there. So now if we come in here and I select this element, well, first let's give ourselves a little bit more room. By the way, that's not scaling how we would want it to. So we have to make an adjustment there with both of these. So what we'll do is select this and this. We want to make sure this is actually bottom. Then we could put it to the bottom, and now watch what happens. It'll stay to the bottom no matter what. All right, now let's hide the grid. It's making things a little bit difficult to see what's happening. And we could just reduce the white space between these elements. All right, and drag this up. All right, great. So now let's go ahead and check this. Everything is pretty much working as we want. We want to go much closer than that. And of course, on our desktop, we kind of want to move everything over here, show what it looks like on the actual desktop. All right, so we're going to go ahead and duplicate this, move it over, change this to a phone. And then for the phone grid, let's go ahead and change that to 4 and 20 for the margin. Again, we'll move things where they need to be. Hold Alt. Okay, so now let's get ourselves to a more phone view. And let's hide the grid. And you'll see here, we have some issues. This gets a little bit too small, so let's create 3 rows and stack them all on top of each other, which is a very common way to deal with these columns and cards essentially. So what we'll do is we can just take this whole section, if I double click and just delete it. For this one, we're going to change auto layout down, and then we will duplicate this 3 times, Control D, and then drag this down. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to change real quick the verbiage. It looks a little silly repeating the sub headline here. So I'm going to change that up. Let's delete these again. And I changed the height of this just by adjusting this here. And so what we can do is duplicate this right there. There we go. Let's bring this back up. This now looks way too large, so we can scale that down. And we could probably also scale it down, by the way, over here. All right, we can move it up. And check this out. Oop, because I believe we added and adjusted the auto layouts, we have a couple issues here. So whenever confusing stuff like that happens, you can take the frame out, and then we can see what's happening. This is properly filling everything that it should, which is at left and right. This right here is also filling, but this element is at fixed width. So we want to choose fill container for each of those 3 elements, and then we'll have fixed the issue. All right, so now we'll drag in. Typically we'd probably be right around here for a phone, and then even smaller. Great. All right, so now, obviously, now you have a little bit more experience dealing with auto layout and constraints. We may do another demonstration of this just so we can really solidify it, and then we'll do some tests and a challenge.